Good evening and welcome. On behalf of California Department of Transportation, I am Wahida Rashid, Senior Environmental Planner on the project, would like to welcome you all to our virtual public meeting for Interstate 580 Bridge Rehabilitation Project. This project is on 580 near the city of Oakland and in Alameda County. With me, I have the project development team from Caltrans who has been working really hard for the past year in the planning and project approval process. Thank you so much for taking the time to join and engage with us and to help us create a successful transportation project for your community. As part of the project planning and approval process, Caltrans has prepared a draft environmental document in compliance with state and federal environmental laws. This environmental document is an initial study with proposed negative declaration under California Environmental Quality Act, known as CEQA, and an environmental assessment under National Environmental Policy Act, known as NEPA. Caltrans' environmental team has also followed Caltrans' policies and guidance, as well as guidance from resource agencies. This environmental document has studied the environmental resources within the project area and also has formulated avoidance minimization and mitigation measures for the proposed project. The draft environmental document has been made available to the public since September 5th of this month and will be available for public review and comment till October 5th of this year. The comment period is 30 days, as you can see, but of all the 30 days, today is probably the most exciting day for Caltrans team because we are looking forward to interact with you all, a member of the public, and hopefully we can answer some of your questions or help clarify issues that you may have. Before we go into the actual project presentation, I would like to introduce to you. With us, we have Maria Gonzalez, the Spanish translator, who will assist us in Spanish translation. Maria, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yes, I am Maria Gonzalez, and I will be the translator for all the questions that you may have in the question session after the presentation. Buenas tardes, soy María González y estoy encantada de estar aquí para poder traducir sus preguntas, las que tenga escritas o orales en la sesión de preguntas que se hará al final de la presentación. Muchísimas gracias.
Thank you so much, Maria. We're looking forward to your assistance later in the question and answer session. Now let's go quickly over the meeting protocols. Can we go to the next slide? Participation ground rules, these are very self-explanatory. Questions can be submitted to the project team via the chat feature throughout the presentation or verbally using the raise hand feature at the end of presentation, which is at the bottom of your screen. We request a respectful exchange during the question and answer session. Inappropriate comments and questions will be removed from the chat and will not be discussed. Comments submitted through chat will not be considered formal and will not be included in the environmental document. We highly recommend that you submit your valuable comments after the review of the draft environmental document. And as you can see on the screen, there are multiple ways for you to submit your comments. Cody Erickson, the Associate Environmental Planner, Environmental Scientist, is the main contact for you to submit your comments. As you can see on the slide, there are multiple ways, including emailing Cody Erickson. You can also write to Cody Erickson using U.S. Postal Service. You can also submit comments online by the link that's provided here. You can also call the number 510-519-1336 for people who may not have access to electronic device. For overall access to the DED or the draft environmental document, the link will be provided in the chat section for you to access the draft environmental document at any point. After the comment period ends, the 30-day, October 5th, we will gather all the comments and we will respond to the comments, and that will be published as part of the final environmental document, which is anticipated to be complete in the winter months of this year. That pretty much wraps up the environmental process. Now, let me introduce you to the project manager, Emmanuel Okereke, who's here today, who's been leading us for the last year, and he will go over the meeting agenda, the project team, as well as the project schedule. Emmanuel?
Manuel, you might be muted.
I am muted. Thank you, Wahida Rashid. Good presentation. Today, we're going to discuss the project and its agenda and the overall overview of the project. I have, like I said, my name is Emmanuel Okereke. I'm the project manager. Caltron has a project number for this project. The project number is 0P900. If you forget everything that Wahida has just said, please remember the project number. If you need to make contact with Caltrans at a later stage, after the DED process, you might want to use the project number. Thank you. Next slide. Okay. Caltrans have reached out to the public in 2 previous occasions with the help of City of Oakland. I want to acknowledge at this point the help of Adams Point and Grand Lake neighborhood officials. I want to also acknowledge the help that is being given to us by the City of Oakland officials. They have facilitated these meetings, and they have continued to partner with us to build a context-sensitive and community-sensitive project. Next slide, please. Today's meeting goals are provide an overview of the project, the environmental process, and the draft environmental document. The second goal would be to listen to you and provide answers where we can. And the third goal would be to share the formal ways of submitting the comments on the draft environmental document. And we have shown the screen to you at the initial stage, and Wahida Rashid did emphasize the ways that you can comment on the draft environmental document. Next slide, please. On the screen, you see the conference team that will be fielding your questions today. This is not all of it. There is a whole host of professionals working in the background. I just want to point out the City of Oakland officials who are here today to also help answer your question. We have Jason Patton, and we'll probably have Joe DeVries to help answer your questions. Next slide, please. This project has a purpose and need that will continue to guide us until we complete this project. The need for the project is that 2 undercrossings and the pedestrian overcrossing do not meet the current seismic standard. The pedestrian overcrossing itself does not meet the vertical clearance and the Americans with Disability Act standards. There is also the need to install bridge railings and upgrade some of it. So the purpose, therefore, is to bring the bridge structures to current design standards, preserve the structural integrity of undercrossings, and demolish the pedestrian overcrossing, upgrade bridge railings to meet current state and federal standards, and maintain connectivity between communities in the project area. Next slide. And now I would like to hand you over to our design engineer, who will take you through the overview and a little more detail on what we plan to do for the project. Ale Hakimi.
Thank you, Emmanuel. Good evening, everyone, and thank you for joining us. My name is Hale Hakimi, and I'm the project engineer on this job. I will go over the scope of work in detail and apologize in advance for too much information that you will be receiving in the next few minutes. But rest assured that our team is here tonight to answer all your questions. Wahida, did you want to say something?
No, I was just smiling.
Oh, sorry. Let me start with the project overview. Our project includes 3 undercrossings labeled as locations 1 through 3 in this table. Location number 1, 2, and 3 will have their bridge railing replaced. Additionally, locations number 2 and 3 will have some seismic retrofits. These are some routine Caltrans improvements that you can find more information about them in the draft environmental document that has been published. At location number 4, the Santa Clara Van Buren pedestrian overcrossing will be demolished, and to compensate for that, our project proposes 2 alternatives. In alternative 1, a new pedestrian overcrossing is proposed between Crescent Street and MacArthur Boulevard. Alternative 2 proposes some surface street enhancement on Grand Avenue, Santa Clara Avenue, and MacArthur Boulevard to improve safety for pedestrians and cyclists. This is the overall project location map indicating the location of each bridge within the project. Here is Interstate 580, and the existing bridges are shown with red dots. The 2 build alternatives that our project proposes have some common features. These common features include bridge railing replacement at 3 of these bridges and seismic retrofit at these 2 locations, and also demolishes the Santa Clara Van Buren Avenue pedestrian overcrossing. The only difference between the build alternative is the 2 build alternatives is the way that Caltrans is proposing to compensate for the demolished pedestrian overcrossing. The location of these proposed replacement alternatives are shown in blue, kind of northeast of Lake Merritt. First, let's talk about the common components between the 2 alternatives, which are, as we discussed, the bridge railing replacement and some seismic retrofit. Then we will go into the pedestrian overcrossing demolition and its replacement alternatives. This slide shows Webster Street undercrossing and Broadway Richmond Boulevard, part of it on this plan. Our project replaces the bridge railings here And during that process, we may have some closures on the local streets underneath of these bridges in order to prevent debris from falling on live traffic. We will work with the city of Oakland and try to limit these closures to nighttime in order to minimize daily traffic disruptions. We are also doing seismic retrofit on Broadway Richmond Boulevard undercrossing. Let me quickly add a note on the red hatches that you see in our plans. These red hatches indicate the potential staging areas that we may be using. And a staging area is where the contractor stores material and equipment during construction. For example, the parking lot underneath the Broadway Richmond Boulevard Bridge marked in red is one of the potential staging areas. Here we see the remainder of Broadway Richmond Boulevard undercrossing with the same type of work, bridge rail replacement and seismic retrofit, and also the same potential staging areas that we just discussed. This is Fruitville Avenue undercrossing with bridge railing replacement as well as seismic retrofit work. Here we also may require some closures on the local streets beneath this bridge for public safety during the process of removal and replacing the bridge railings. The park and ride under this bridge will be potentially a staging area, which may not be entirely available for public use during construction. Now we move on to the pedestrian overcrossing demolition and the proposed replacement alternatives. Here we see a recent street view of existing pedestrian overcrossing. This pedestrian overcrossing will be demolished because it does not meet the current seismic design standards and is not ADA compliant. It also does not satisfy the minimum vertical clearance requirements. On this slide, we see the spiral ramps at each end of the existing pedestrian overcrossing on MacArthur Boulevard and Santa Clara Avenue. As you can see in these pictures, the spiral ramps are currently very close to some of the residential buildings. This proximity is actually one of the main constraints that we are not able to rebuild a new ADA compliant pedestrian overcrossing in the same place. On the right side of your screen here, we see a plan view of the existing pedestrian overcrossing that will be demolished. It is shown in pink. The demolition may require temporary closures of the ramps and the streets, the local streets. The ramps will be probably closed during the daytime, and the entire Highway 580 will have nighttime closures in order to demolish the portion of the pedestrian overcrossing that crosses over 580. This is the first replacement alternative, which proposes to construct a new pedestrian overcrossing. And this new pedestrian overcrossing has a landing on Crescent Street cul-de-sac and is approximately 600 feet northwest of Santa Clara Avenue. The other end of the proposed pedestrian overcrossing lands on MacArthur Boulevard near the synagogue. Building this new pedestrian overcrossing may require some temporary closures of MacArthur Boulevard and will limit the street parkings during construction. This is a preliminary photo simulation of the proposed pedestrian overcrossing spanning over 580 between Crescent Street and MacArthur Boulevard, which was introduced to you as alternative 1. Here we see the street view of Crescent Street, where the eastern touchdown of the new pedestrian overcrossing will be placed. During construction, a portion of this cul-de-sac will be used as a staging area, which is shown with black dashed lines. This will impact some street parkings and also the garage access for the white building on the right side of your screens. One-way traffic to and from this garage will be controlled by automated traffic flaggers during construction. Here we have a street view of MacArthur Boulevard, where the western touchdown of the new pedestrian overcrossing will be placed. Approximately, it's going to be across the Temple of Beth Abraham. A portion of MacArthur Boulevard will be used as a staging area, again shown with black dashed lines. This will impact some street parkings and traffic flow during construction. On the left side of this slide in pink, again, we see the existing pedestrian overcrossing that will be demolished. The project's second replacement alternative proposes to enhance parts of MacArthur Boulevard, Grand Avenue, and Santa Clara Avenue to provide pedestrian and cyclists a safer access between the touchdowns of the existing pedestrian overcrossing on the surface streets. This is an area where Caltrans and the City of Oakland have been working closely as each entity owns part of these areas. My colleague Jake Friedman will discuss the details of the proposed conceptual enhancement shortly. But just before that, it is worth to mention that the proposed modifications are still at a conceptual level and are subject to further studies and revisions. And with that, I will hand it over to Jake Friedman. Thank you.
Thanks, Hala. And before I get started, I just want to mention that this presentation is being recorded and will be available on the project website afterwards. Hi, my name is Jake Friedman. I'm a senior transportation planner with the Caltrans Bay Area Office of Transit and Active Transportation. I'm going to discuss some of the potential surface streets improvements that are being considered as a replacement for the pedestrian overcrossing in Alternative 2. In recent years, Caltrans has really accelerated its focus on walking, biking, and transit in line with state goals. And while this project predates some of our new policies, this is one of the first projects where we are proposing to provide upgraded complete streets facilities that will really enhance mobility for all users. Now, let me walk you through some of the potential improvements to bridge the gaps between these two communities without an actual bridge. Please note that the final design details are still subject to further change pending public and stakeholder input, as well as coordination and collaboration with our partners at the City of Oakland, which has its own potential plans and projects for the Grand Avenue corridor. Let me first explain some of the color coding here. Blue is new raised concrete. White is removing existing concrete or new pavement delineation, depending on the context. And green is either new bicycle pavement delineation or the right-of-way lines, depending on the context. Now, let's start in the bottom left corner of our screens, next to the to-be-demolished overcrossing touchdown on MacArthur near Van Buren. And imagine we're walking or rolling to visit our friend on Santa Clara near the other touchdown. As we travel east, we come to the unsignalized intersection with Van Buren Avenue, where a bus bulb out, curb extension, and high visibility crosswalk could make this a lower stress crossing for pedestrians and transit users. As we continue east down MacArthur, improvements could include modifying the eastbound I-580 off-ramp and providing new pavement delineation in order to reduce weaving and calm traffic exiting the freeway. Striping improvements could include a buffered Class 2 bike lane between Van Buren and Grand Avenue. And as we move to the intersection of MacArthur and Grand, you can see a potential configuration for a curb-protected corner that includes a bus bulb out and loading zone to help address modal conflicts here at a busy bus stop. Now let's move through the intersection via new high-visibility pavement markings up north on Grand Avenue, where we're proposing to shift the existing median shown in white over to the west to accommodate new parking buffered bike lanes in both directions on Grand Avenue shown in blue. This could include bus boarding islands on southbound Grand at MacArthur and northbound Grand at Lake Park to reduce conflicts between cyclists and transit operations. Now let's zoom in on the Grand Ave, Lake Park, and Santa Clara Avenue intersection, and imagine we're continuing our journey up Grand Avenue to the Santa Clara touchdown area. Protected intersection improvements and curb extensions at all four corners of this intersection should shorten crossing distances for pedestrians while lowering traffic stress and reducing conflict points for cyclists traveling through the intersection. Striping, geometric, and landscaping improvements to the I-580 westbound off-ramp adjacent to Santa Clara Avenue could also calm traffic entering the intersection from the freeway. Now let's go to the northwest corner of Grand and Santa Clara. Pedestrians wishing to head west of Santa Clara presently have to negotiate a potentially crowded sidewalk bus stop and then cross an unsignalized free right or slip lane where cars are turning off Grand Ave to access Santa Clara or the freeway on-ramp. Presently, cyclists only have a narrow Class 2 bike lane going westbound on Santa Clara. A potential way to address these connectivity issues here could include removing the free right, creating a pedestrian plaza shown here in brown, and introducing traffic calming features on westbound Santa Clara Avenue. This would remove an unsignalized pedestrian crossing, accommodate a bus boarding island, as well as a two-way Class 4 cycle track from Grand Avenue continuing to Santa Clara Avenue to connect to the existing facilities at the westbound I-580 on-ramp intersection. These improvements would narrow westbound Santa Clara to one lane prior to that I-580 on-ramp intersection, which could have a traffic calming effect and provide enough space to include a loading zone to maintain access to local businesses. Protected intersection improvements at Santa Clara in front of the existing Santa Clara touchdown could make this a more comfortable place to cross, either rolling or on foot. Now let me show you what this might look like on the ground. Here's the intersection of MacArthur and Grand, showing the new pavement striping, bus bulb, and protected intersection for cyclists, as well as the buffered bike lane and bus boarding island on Grand. Now, if we go to the next slide, this is looking east from the same intersection where you can see the relocated median, new pavement delineations, and if you look really close, you can also see the northbound buffered bike lane there. Thank you for going on this little walk with me, and since these improvements are still conceptual, I encourage you all to submit official comments in the ways described in the chat, which has just been posted. Now I'm going to hand things off to Cody Erickson to discuss the potential environmental issues.
Thank you for that, Jake. Hi, everyone. My name is Cody Erickson. I'm the environmental planner on the project, and I'd like to go over a summary of the environmental impacts as a result of this project. These are all covered more in depth in the draft environmental document as well. So the draft environmental document assessed impacts to all environmental resource areas, and we found that there are no anticipated permanent impacts to biological or cultural resources, to hazardous waste, air quality, water quality. However, there are permanent impacts to some visual resources, especially for people who live and pass through these communities. Most of the temporary impacts expected during construction will relate again to visual resources from things like tree and vegetation removal and construction staging areas, impacts to traffic circulation from lane closures and detours that would be needed for some of this work, and impacts from noise generated from construction activities. So I mentioned tree removal, and so there is some tree removal anticipated, mostly due to the demolition of the existing pedestrian overcrossing. In total, about 66 trees would be removed under Build Alternative 1, which is the new pedestrian overcrossing, and 48 trees under Build Alternative 2, which is the surface street improvements. There is also some parking lots anticipated. We are currently estimating somewhere between the range of 5 to 10 spaces under either build alternative. This is still very preliminary, and we will have a better idea as the design is further refined. Just want to point out as well that we did identify environmental justice communities within the project area. However, we completed a community impact assessment, and we found that there would be no disproportionate impact to those communities. Next slide, please. So this is an example of some of the replanting efforts that Caltrans would perform after we perform this work. So this is a before and after view of the MacArthur Boulevard end of the existing pedestrian overcrossing. So you can see that the ramp on the left, the left picture there of the existing view, it's in a small area right next to apartments, and there are a lot of trees grouped around right there. These will need to be removed to demolish this structure. But after demolition, Caltrans will revegetate and replant the area, and to the right is a conceptual example of what this could look like. Next slide, please. So similarly, this is a view of the Santa Clara Avenue end of the pedestrian overcrossing. As you can see on the left photo, it's also surrounded by trees, and so these trees would also need to come down to demolish the spiral ramp. And to the right is just another conceptual view of how this may look once it's demolished. Next slide, please. Okay, so these photos show before and after conditions of the new pedestrian overcrossing under Bill Alternative 1 from the view of Crescent Street, the Crescent Street cul-de-sac. So this is just to show the visual change that would occur if this alternative is chosen. You'll notice in the picture on the left that these trees here towards the back, sort of like a wall of trees, act as a shield or screen of Interstate 580 for the residents who live in this area. And so you'll see on the right that some of these trees would need to be removed. And after doing that, some of these views would be opened up of I-580 and views of course, the new structure that will be placed there. Next slide, please. This is also before and after comparison of the new overcrossing under Bill Alternative 1, but from the view of MacArthur Boulevard. So you'll notice that in the photo on the left, there's also sort of like a wall of trees going along MacArthur Boulevard that also acts as a screen for the residents in this area, and for Temple Beth Abraham is the brick building right there to the right. So you'll notice in the picture on the right, you'll see there towards the left that there's the new touchdown ramp right there for that new pedestrian overcrossing. So you'll see that some trees there will also need to be taken down. And so this is a visual change that would be noticed by the residents in this area and the temple. Also just quickly pointing out, you can see the new crosswalk proposed under this alternative as well on the right. Next slide, please. Okay, so I'd like to briefly go over the next steps in the environmental process. We are currently in the public comment period, with that set to close on October 5th. So please, we highly encourage you to submit your comments in one of the 4 ways that we've mentioned by October 5th. After that, between October and November, Caltrans will be reviewing all the comments received and incorporating them into the final environmental document. This is also when a preferred alternative will be selected for the project. Sometime later this year in winter, the final environmental document will be completed, and the project will then move into the next phase of the development process. With that, I'd like to pass it back to our project manager, Emmanuel Okereke. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Cody. Thank you. And again, welcome to everybody. I hope we have made some progress and made some sense in what we talked to you about this evening. Up in your screen, it's a general and approximate schedule for the project implementation. Right now, like Cody said, we are in the public review process, which will end in October 22. After that, the final environmental document we anticipate may be possible by winter of 2022. A final design for this project, when we would have selected the build alternative, will be sometime in spring of 2024. We anticipate that construction may start by January of 2025, and hopefully we can complete by March of 2026. Next slide. Again, thank you for listening to us. It's now time for questions and answers. As Cody and the previous speakers pointed out, your comments and questions today will not be recorded officially in the draft environmental document process. If you need to make official comment, you need to use these various ways that has been given to you. It's up on the screen. I will now call on Janice Mara, our Public Information Officer, to moderate the question and answers period. Janice?
Thank you, and hello, everyone. I'm Janice Mara, Caltrans Information Officer for Alameda County, and thank you all again for coming tonight. I'll be moderating the Q&A session along with Mark Friedheim. And a couple things I'd like you all to know. The question and answer period will end at 7:30 p.m., and that will be the end of our program tonight. To ask a question or share a comment, type it into the chat box, which I see folks have been doing all along, and I've been keeping track of all your questions and comments. Very important, I know others have mentioned this already, and we had 3 questions. Will verbal comments today become part of the record? Will comments have any influence on the project, or are these just a formality? And will verbal comments tonight be considered official public comments? So wanted to address that again. The verbal comments tonight will not go into the environmental document. So if you would like your comments and questions to be included, please follow the directions that are up on the screen at this moment. So with that, we will go ahead with the Q&A session. As I said, the way to share your questions or comments is to type them into the chat box, which folks have already been doing, or raise your hand. And I'm going to start then with the first question that isn't about the verbal comments. And that is from Deborah Israel. And she asked us to share the project website in the chat, which I'm sure we can drop in momentarily. And then I'm going to go on to the next question from Paula Manildi. She says, I submitted this comment online. As a resident of Crescent Street, one of 4 homes, I vote for and encourage you to choose an alternative 2. The overcrossing is not used hardly at all, and the underpass is close and convenient to all business and parking uses. We don't need more foot traffic on our street with already having 4 apartments/condos and a duplex. That's a lot of residents already. I know, I sit on my porch and see them all. And that's our first question or comment. Would anyone like to address this, or shall we just let it stand as a comment?
Thank you. I think we should just let it stand as a comment. It's her opinion.
Okay,
Yes,
excellent.
I just want to assure you that we are looking at all issues and considering all issues, and we have thought about your comment already.
Okay.
Go ahead.
And on to the next comment, which actually it's 2 comments from Christian Soares. Why was there no outreach to Piedmont Avenue? And then there are several Piedmont Avenue merchant and resident associations.
Okay. In considering this Emmanuel Okerekede project manager, there's always a limit to what we can do in terms of reaching out. But because this project is directly around the Grand Avenue area, we did reach out to the Adams Point and the Grand Lake area. We will be happy to forward information to you or other group that you may have at a later point to make sure that you're able to comment. We're sorry we didn't get to your neighborhood, but there's just a limit to what we can do. Thank you.
Okay, and Quan Butts did follow up with a response, but I believe he later withdrew that comment. The next 2 comments relate to Christian's earlier question. And then we move on to Liz, who is asking, why was there no outreach to Richmond Boulevard? And also Ruth Dye, why was there no outreach on Crescent Street? So perhaps those two relate to the earlier answer, Emmanuel?
Yes, again, I think we are taking a record of this comment and recording, and we would make an effort, especially if there is some organized group in these locations, to send out flyers or communicate. But again, the regulations require us to look at the immediate neighborhood, and we did our best to communicate around those areas. But we would be happy to forward information if you reach out to us and provide some information about yourself. We will be glad to provide further information as you need it.
Absolutely. And also, I'm receiving some information that, in fact, we did do outreach on Crescent Street. Apparently, there was some issue with the post office delivering the flyers. But again, as Emmanuel said, we will be sure to follow up after this meeting with the questioners. Okay, and so now on to the next question from Morgan W. The Richmond Boulevard crossing is literally our next door neighbor, and Caltrans clear-cutting trees in the lot and then doing nothing has left our property open to blight and trespassing. Will this project be able to account for additional structures, i.e. noise abatement and security for residents, that are immediately adjacent to the undercrossings? Will there be a forum to propose rail replacement alternatives, or is this forum it?
Okay, at this point, I would like to call on our senior environmental planner to take a stab at it. I may call on other Caltrans officials to take a look at it. Go ahead, Wahida Rashid.
Thank you for your comment. I do not actually, I'm not aware of the trees that has been taken down. Perhaps it's another project. However, we'll definitely take a look at it. And typically, when we do take trees down or remove trees, we do have a replacement planting or replanting measure, but I am not sure which project this is, but we'll definitely investigate. And if you please submit your comment in writing, that would help us so much to respond to you also after our own internal homework that we need to do. Who are these people that took the trees out? So hopefully that answers your question. And was there a second part to it, Janice?
Will there be a forum to propose rail replacement alternatives, or is this forum it?
Rail replacement.
Let's see. My apology, I didn't read the whole thing. Okay, so they're asking, will this project be able to account for additional structures, i.e. noise abatement and security for residents that are immediately adjacent to the undercrossings? Will there be a forum to propose rail replacement alternatives, or is this forum it, perhaps referring to handrails? I don't know.
Could be.
This forum, yeah, go ahead.
But for noise abatement, I would like to let who was this question from, Janice?
Morgan W.
Mr. Morgan, I would like to let you know that we have done a noise study on this project, and we do have some protocols that we follow during construction to, if the noise level is exceeding beyond a certain threshold, we do take measures to minimize that. I don't know if Kevin, if you have anything to add to that. Kevin Cruson is our environmental engineering office chief for noise and air. But that's what I know so far, hopefully. Kevin, would you like to add anything to that in terms of noise abatement?
Yes. Excuse me? was going to say, we studied the construction noise and where it would be loudest, what receptors, residences and schools would be most affected by it. That was for construction. But I think Morgan's question, and possibly there's another one from Liz also, I think concerns freeway noise. Now, this project doesn't touch the freeway or affect the traffic flow on the freeway, so operational noise is not a consideration on this project. So we don't have any noise abatement features to deal with the freeway noise.
Meaning the existing noise, correct?
Yes.
Okay.
Dryer.
Somebody needs to unmute. There's a background noise.
Okay. All right.
Okay.
Is that
Let me. I would like to summarize. This is Emmanuel, and answer directly that yes, this is the environmental process for all locations of the project, including the Richmond. So there is no plan to conduct a separate draft environmental document process. So should you have any comment on the Richmond, Broadway, or Fruitvale portions of the project, please feel free to use the methods that are on your screen to provide information. Thank you. Go ahead.
okay?
Janice.
All right. Excellent. So the next question from Ken Katz. What is the budget for tearing down the pedestrian overcrossing from Santa Clara to MacArthur?
I think I'll call on the senior design engineer to try to answer that, Vince Bonner. And if Vince is not here, could you take it up, Ale? Akimi?
Sure. I actually don't have the number in front of me. I think Mark will be the better person to answer that. He's our senior bridge engineer.
Yeah, I was looking to see if I had a separated out number for each of the POC removals, and I don't have it in front of me, but I'm looking for it.
Okay. One thing we can do, Janice, what's the name of the commentator?
The name of that commenter is Ken Katz. So we can be sure
Yeah,
to.
Mr. Kurz, if you would communicate and provide us with your information, we will surely do that segregation and send it to you. But what we do have now is more like an overall cost estimate for each of the project alternatives. But the segregation should be easy to do, and we can provide you that information. If you communicate, we can actually be able to get back to you.
So Emmanuel, I did find a number here. It's estimated to cost approximately $550,000 to remove the Santa Clara Avenue POC.
Good, thank you, Mark. I appreciate that. The next question then, Janice.
Okay, so there were a few additional questions about freeway noise. I think we've already addressed that. Now moving on to Liz's question. The staging areas are literally next to our building. What time of day will construction take place?
Would you like to take a stab at that, Mark?
Emmanuel, that might be maybe better answered by our structure construction folks.
Okay. That would be Lai.
Yes, that's me,
Gary.
Gary. Yes, so
Go ahead.
so things are still very preliminary in terms of the design, and I believe that construction will probably take place during nighttime hours, obviously for demolition, and during the day as well, within certain windows allotted by sound and noise restrictions.
It looks like the next question relates to that. Will demolition be done in an eco-friendly manner, from Jimmy?
To some extent, yes. The demolition, the products resulting from demolition will generally be recycled, as it helps to offset the cost of removal of those materials from the site.
Great. Okay. And now from Liz, will the retrofit project impact the park area underneath the 580 structure on Richmond Boulevard?
Again, that I think it's a structure question. Would you like to answer, Mark? Or
Yeah, I think we're going to have to get back to you in terms of the impacts. I don't think it'll impact that area permanently. There may be some temporary impacts in terms of access, but the construction is primarily focused on retrofitting the columns using steel column casings. And so we're not really changing the structure geometry too much.
Ale, do you have anything to add to it?
No, Mark actually said it very well. We are just doing some steel casing, so it shouldn't impact the permanent parking. But I don't know if the question was about parking on Richmond Boulevard or on local streets during construction.
Sorry, I think the question was about the park underneath.
About the park, exactly. May I add something, Emmanuel?
Yes, please go ahead.
The bridge engineers are still looking at, this is still the planning phase. However, your comments are actually help us figure these things out in the design phase. After the environmental phase, we'll go into the design phase and look into how can we avoid or minimize the impact to the park if needs to be. So in case if there is a temporary impact on the park, in terms of access, there's always going to be an alternative access or detour will be provided. Caltrans never closes off an access point. If that needs to be, then we provide an alternative. But we'll definitely make a note of your comment and make sure when we actually go design and into some of these details, we'll definitely take your comment to note. Yeah, thank you so much.
Thank you, Wahida. Next question.
All right, from Anders Peterson. If alternative 1 is chosen, will the improvements of alternative 2 not be completed?
I think design, Ale, maybe you can explain some of the things that perhaps will still be done if alternative 1 is chosen.
Sure. So we are proposing actually 2 alternatives as a replacement for the demolished pedestrian overcrossing. So in order to have a new pedestrian overcrossing, we're proposing a new location, slightly different, as I mentioned, because of the constraints that we have, right-of-way issues, the proximity of the existing buildings. We cannot build the POC in the same place. So that's one alternative. And our project is not, it does not have the budget for both. So it's either or. So if we don't do the alternative one, we will do the street surface street improvements. I hope that answers your question.
Okay, thank you, Halle. I appreciate it.
Okay.
Next question.
Next question from Paula Manildi. I don't see any usage statistics to justify building a new pedestrian overcrossing, nor for added foot traffic. No reason to do alternative one. So I guess we leave that as a comment, or do you wish to respond?
Yes, I think we just leave it at a comment that we've noted.
Okay, and next question.
Unless you have something to add to it, Wahida?
Yes, I did want to.
Okay, go ahead.
I did want to let the public know that we did a study to figure out how many people are using this pedestrian overcrossing. And you are probably right. There's actually not a lot of users at this point using this pedestrian overcrossing. So your comment is noted, but I just wanted to let you know that we actually had a survey done and counted how many people crosses this bridge every day.
Okay.
Thank you, Wahida.
Yeah, thanks.
Next question.
Okay, so I believe we do have some hands up, and let's see whose hands are up.
Yeah, so I have Kwan Butts as the first person to raise their hand.
Okay, Mr. Bob, please go ahead and say your question. Thank you for asking anyway.
Okay. Thank you for this presentation. I'm submitting more comments kind of via email, but I did want to highlight something and echo what a lot of people are commenting here, which is I'm really encouraged by the work with OakDOT to improve bike and pedestrian safety. This 580 interchange slams through a highly pedestrian area, the Granite Lakeshore Commercial District. It's incredibly dangerous. I use it every day. Vehicles maneuver around that area in an incredibly dangerous way. So I am fully in support of as much concrete as possible to limit the way that drivers operate their vehicles in the area. And I would like to emphasize any way to reduce the number of lanes, particularly north and southbound on Grand, as well as MacArthur, which is far overbuilt, 3+ lanes wide, running eastbound. It's very inappropriate. I would also like to emphasize the removal of slip lanes. I'm heartened to see the removal of the Santa Clara slip lane. That's a particularly dangerous slip lane. If anybody's had to cross there, vehicles kind of maintain speeds in excess of 35, 40 miles an hour. So if I were to be hit, I would die instantaneously. I would like to emphasize that we also do remove the slip lane that is turning eastbound onto MacArthur from Grand in the same way. It's similarly dangerous. Just a couple weeks ago, 2 vehicles were gunning to get in front of each other at that intersection. They slammed into each other, pushed into a stopped vehicle at the pedestrian crossing that I was at, and that vehicle was pushed into me and 4 others at that crosswalk. That's not an uncommon occurrence. So I'm just begging you, as you work on this project, please remove all slip lanes. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Bob. What do you suggest, Tim? We let the comment stand, or does any team member have, including our Oakland partners? Jason, do you have any comment, follow-up, or do we let it stand? Any team member can jump in.
Thanks. I don't think I have anything to add. Thank you for your comment.
Thank you, Jake. Next question then.
On to the next raised hand.
Okay, so David Goodman was next. Goodwin.
And it's why there isn't a formal environmental impact study rather than just the informal CEQA study. And I have 3 points to make in connection with it. First, there was a case called Friends of B Street versus City of Hayward that required an environmental impact study for a project that increased traffic, noise, reduced parking, and removed trees, which sounds very much like alternative 1. The second point is that the CEQA regulations, in particular section 15131B, cannot require a study if construction would disturb existing religious practices in an area. And I think, as you've heard from the comments, Temple Beth Abraham has on a daily basis children in nursery school, in elementary school, in religious school, in a kinder gym, and holds religious services, all of which would be disrupted by the construction. And third, and I'll put this into a letter, obviously, to Cody, but third is CEQA guideline 15064 talks about social effects. And for Temple Beth Abraham, there is a very significant and very disturbing social effect. Not just the effect of permanently losing parking places and trees in a synagogue where there is inadequate parking as is, but it serves many elderly and infirm people. But more important, there have been anti-Semitic acts across the country involving shooters and other terrorists. And if this bridge is put in, a shooter comes, we call the police will not be able to follow the shooter across the bridge. It's like aiming a target right at the synagogue. And this is of great, great concern to the members of the synagogue. And we just don't see how you can go with alternative one without doing a formal study to assess this. Thank you.
Thank you. Please, could you remind us your name again? I'm sorry.
It's David Goodwin.
Yeah, Mr. Goodman, thank you for your comment. I think we'll just let it stand on its own, and you have promised to formally write in these comments. We look forward to reading them and considering them and responding.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Emmanuel, I
yes.
would like to add something. First
Sure,
of all,
go ahead,
thank you so
Wahida.
much for your comment, Mr. Goodwin. We would like you to know that we have done a community impact assessment where this issue has been brought up. That's a technical study that we have prepared in preparation of the CEQA document that you are reviewing. And we're also in communication with the leaders of the synagogue, and they have expressed similar concerns as you have talked about today. So definitely we're taking those things in consideration. We are just merely proposing two alternatives, but we have not selected a preferred alternative yet. And that is why we're here. So your comments, thank you for your comments. We'll definitely take that into consideration.
Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you, Wahida. Next question, please.
I believe there's one more raised hand.
Yeah, the third was Polly Legendre.
Paulie Legendre, welcome. Please go ahead and ask your question.
This is Michael Lee calling. I'm Polly Legendre's husband. I've put some various questions in the chat, but I have two for you. One is a comment and a question. Several times Caltrans employees have indicated that studies have been done of the use of the existing Santa Clara Bridge, but on page 76 it indicates that Caltrans has not conducted a thorough evaluation of active transportation and transit travel patterns or needs within the project area. And now, I'm a professor at Cal State East Bay. I live on Crescent Street, and I teach sustainability issues, and it seems to me that this is a very, very kind of big gap in our understanding of the need for the project. It is a lack of data either on historical use or projected future use. Could you comment on why a more thorough study has been done rather than just kind of a 6-day study in October?
Thank you. I appreciate. What was your name again?
Michael Lee, L-E-E.
Michael, yeah, Professor Michael Lee. We did get comments from you earlier. Thank you for all your comments and thank you for attending this meeting. What I can say is that we, at this point, the studies that we have done, we consider good enough to proceed with the project. But like we have advised everybody, if you have comments, official comment, please use the methods that were indicated. We will actually review it, and if we believe that additional studies is necessary, we will engage in that and we will communicate that. But as of today, we believe that the studies we have done is good enough and it's okay to proceed with the project.
Okay, then a second question relates to cost and cost benefits. Of course, we're concerned about spending taxpayer money in a wise fashion. I heard some numbers about the cost of deconstruction of the existing bridge. That cost is going to be the same for option 1 or option 2 because both involve the destruction. But what we haven't heard is any idea of the relative costs of option 1 versus option 2. It's important that we understand how much of taxpayer money is going to be spent to understand also the benefits that it will bring. Clearly, from what I'm hearing and seeing in the chat and listening to people, there's a lot of broader, more diverse benefits to a large group of people from option 2. I'm not hearing the same comments for option 1. So do you have estimates of the relative costs of option 1, option 2 that we could consider? Because I think that's an important factor for the public to know.
Thank you so much, Mr. Lee. Let me emphasize that estimates and costs are preliminary, but I think our design team does have a relative cost of alternative 1 versus alternative 2. So I would call on the senior design engineer, Vince Bonner, and if not possible, the project engineer, Haleh Hakimi, to give us a ballpark estimate of alternative 1 and 2.
Sure. I will go ahead and I have in front of me, I have the overall cost estimate for the build alternative 1 versus build alternative 2, which includes the seismic retrofits and the bridge rail replacements. We can get back to you on the particular cost of just the new pedestrian overcrossing versus the surface street upgrades later on. We'll take a note of that. But overall cost estimate for alternative 1, including the seismic retrofit and the bridge rail replacement, is about 24 million. And alternative 2, with all the seismic retrofit and everything else, turns out to be 26.8. They are about 2.6, 2.7 million apart overall.
So in that case, we're talking about plus 2.6 million for option 2, but we don't know what benefits that would bring relative to the other project in terms of what the distributed benefits will be from that.
Thank you, Mr. Lee. I think environmental, our senior environmental planner can talk about the relative benefits of both alternatives, really. As she pointed out, we have not made decisions, but I think we've looked at the relative both negative and positive impacts of both alternatives. Wahida, do you think you can talk a little bit about that?
You're looking for a comparison that is not cost related, but overall benefits to the public, correct, Mr. Lee? Benefits of the two alternatives, is that the question? Like he wants to see a comparison of benefits of the two alternatives instead of the pedestrian overcrossing.
Right, let's start with that. Just the relative advantages and disadvantages of both alternatives.
Right. I mean,
what is, yeah.
Both alternatives has pros and cons for sure. The pedestrian overcrossing, obviously, the biggest advantage is the separation of vehicles and bicycle and pedestrians. It's definitely the lowest stress in terms of bike ped movement across 580. That's the biggest benefit of the overcrossing. However, because we are having to accommodate the American Disabilities Act, because of that law, we are also having to move people of all abilities. The location of the proposed pedestrian overcrossing is questionable, as somebody else has mentioned. The touchdown points in front of the synagogue. We have other issues with the other touchdown point. However, the benefit is it separates from the vehicle. As a commentator earlier was saying, that there's very high speed, vehicles moving along the MacArthur and this area. And the pros and cons for the surface street improvement is, of course, it's probably lower in cost. I don't know that quite yet, but probably similar. But it also helps people cross the streets from bicycle and pedestrian movement standpoint quite safely with all the measures that we are considering at this point. However, many people may not be still comfortable with whatever measure we take, but these are still surface street improvements. So I don't remember quite vividly. I don't know, Cody, if you can help me if we have a table in the environmental document in pros and cons, but we're still thinking about it. This is just the draft environmental document, and we would like to keep these questions alive and keep researching as the team, and we will definitely respond to your question too. And if needs to be, we'll develop a table and send it back to you.
Okay, and thank you so much, Wahida. Time is marching on and we have not been able to answer everyone's question. There are half of all the people who have asked questions have not had their questions addressed, so I think we should move on to the next question. In the chat, we have taken care of all the questions with hands raised. So moving on to the chat, I see here that Anders Peterson has asked, what will happen to the areas where the existing pedestrian overcrossing currently is? Will Caltrans plant trees? And Anders also asks, could some park benches be added to these areas after their removal?
Thank you, Mr. Anderson. I will have our senior landscape architect answer that, Lydia Mack.
Hi, everyone. First of all, thank you for being so patient and come to our meeting tonight. I'm Lydia Mack. I'm with Office of Landscape Architecture, Senior Landscape Architect. Thank you for your question. We do intend to, after the removal of the POC landing, we do intend to landscape that area with hardscape, landscape, or a combination of both to improve it, particularly the area where it's between the residential homes area. That area happened to be within the city of Oakland, so we'll collaborate with them and come up with a improvement that's suitable for that location, and we'll also welcome your input too. as possibly bench could be considered. We want to make that area be useful for the community. I hope that answered your question.
Thank you, Lydia. Thank you. Next question.
Okay, giving folks who have not yet had a chance to ask their question to have their question addressed, Shayna Hirschfield has asked that we provide usage statistics for the pedestrian overcrossing near Grand, as well as the undercrossing on Grand and the bridge at Adams. This may be one we have to send to her later.
I totally agree, Janice. I would encourage the commenter to send via any of these formal method that request, and we will surely get back to you with that information. We did conduct some studies in those areas.
Okay, excellent. Sounds good.
Janice, if I could chime in, we do have several more raised hands, by the way, so it wasn't the end of those.
Oh, okay. So let's go to the raised hands.
Okay, Ruth Dye has been patiently waiting. I think
Ruth, please go ahead.
she may have withdrawn. If not, Jen Jackson would be next in line there.
Mr. Johnson, you have the floor.
You can unmute Jen Jackson, please.
Yeah, I'm trying to. I think, oh, there you go.
My name is Jen Jackson. I live on Vernon Street in Adams Point. And I wanted to comment on the bicycle lanes that you've discussed at the bottom of MacArthur at Grand and over also on the westbound 580 on-ramp. Coming down MacArthur, it's there's a lot of lanes kind of coming together in addition to the neighborhood traffic that comes off of, I think it's Staten. And it's just a very irrational area for a bicyclist. And I think having a longer concrete protection along there would be a good idea if possible. I agree with one of the previous commenters about removal of slip lanes, both on Grand onto westbound 580 and elsewhere, maybe on the other side over going onto Lakeshore as well. They're just incredibly dangerous for pedestrians, and drivers do not look both ways. For the bike lanes that are heading westbound, kind of adjacent to the 580 on-ramp, that's a very, very scary bike lane. You're right next to, in a very narrow section, to a lot of very fast cars, and there's always debris in that bike lane. And so I think it needs to be protected. If there's not enough space there, that pork chop or lamb chop could be reduced in size as you make a pedestrian plaza or whatever you're thinking there as you remove that slip lane. So you could make it a lot safer for a cyclist. And I'd love to hear from one of your staff about whether that's in the plans. It was a little hard to, I know these are conceptual drawings, but if you could comment a little bit more on what you're thinking in terms of protecting bicyclists. I don't think plastic bollards or something like that's an adequate protection. We need concrete, unfortunately. Thanks so much.
Thank you so much. I'm glad you do realize that most of the plans are in preliminary stage, but I will call on Jake Friedman, our senior bicycle and pedestrian.
Thank you, Emmanuel, and Jen, thank you for your question. You raised some really important points. It is certainly a lot of high stress areas for cyclists. So let me talk to your last comment about the location on Santa Clara and the potential configuration of a bike lane there. So yeah, so the existing westbound bike lane is it's not in the Pork Chop Island area. It's on Santa Clara, right? So you're right next to that high speed traffic. The concept that we are looking at now that's in the material that we shared would have a way for cyclists to access basically the inside of the pork chop, and then by removing a lane, we would accommodate room to put some sort of curb barrier potentially that's separating a two-way cycle track from that westbound to Santa Clara or westbound to I-580 on-ramp traffic. So that's to answer your question about the Santa Clara location, which is very preliminary now, but it's certainly issues that have been raised about biking through that area. With regards to MacArthur, noted, it is a very challenging area. There are a lot of constraints and a lot of different modes using it, from cars to transit, as well as constrained areas for pedestrian and cyclists. So it is we're certainly looking at different ways to best separate cyclists from high stress situations there. It might not be feasible to have concrete on the MacArthur location, but we'll look into what could be feasible. That one might have to be just adding more buffered paint than is present. But again, these are conceptual plans, and if you submit official comments, we would respond to them. So I appreciate your comments and for attending the meeting. Thank you.
Okay, just jumping in here, it's 7:26, and our question and answer session and our program are drawing to an end. I think we can probably fit in one more question. Should it be from a raised hand or from the chat?
Go ahead with the chat.
Okay, from Frank. Are alternatives 1 and 2 mutually exclusive?
I'll check that because that borders on finance too. We would like to build everything that is good, but the funding limits what we can do. So yes, they are mutually exclusive. The very idea is to mitigate the demolition of the pedestrian overcrossing. Because of funding issues, we can only do one or the other. And that applies to the entire project. What we have right now is preliminary plans. The cost of the various improvements will also weigh in. It's not everything, but it will be part of the consideration of what we can do. At this point, I probably would like to invite anyone from the city of Oakland to chime in on the street improvements around that Grand Avenue, and if the city has any plans or that will complement Caltrans plans. Jason, are you on the line?
I am, Emmanuel. Yeah, and thanks for the opportunity. My name is Jason Patton with the City of Oakland's Department of Transportation, and we've been working closely with the Caltrans team on the possible surface street improvements, and we very much appreciate that opportunity. The connection between Adams Point and Grand Lake is really important, and the presence of 580 in Grand Lake is also large. And so trying to get all that to work, we really see the pedestrian overcrossing question as a once in a lifetime opportunity. This is a 60-year-old bridge that's reached the end of its design life, and its original intent was to help connect those two neighborhoods across the newly constructed 580. And so we're looking for ways to make as much of that connection as we can with the resources in play to address the pedestrian overcrossing. And the comments this evening have been very helpful and very helpful to us in trying to get the most out of that. I'd encourage people to look at and think about the concept of closing the slip lane from Grand Avenue onto Santa Clara Avenue and turning that into a combination of pedestrian plaza and also two-way bike access up to Santa Clara Avenue that would be separated back away from the on-ramp. I think that's one of the biggest changes proposed. The other changes are also important, but that's kind of a big change. And so we're very interested in what people think about that as we try and keep the best interests of the neighborhoods close at mind in working with Caltrans to develop feasible alternatives.
Well, that's an excellent answer, and you had the last word, so thank you so much.
Thank you,
Really
Jason.
appreciate it. Well said. Again, we do encourage folks to follow the 4 methods outlined on the screen to submit your comments and questions. It's 7:30, and we are closing the question and answer session. This concludes our program for the evening. Thanks again to you all for coming.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. And if we did not get to you, please submit a formal question. We would respond to it. Thank you so much.